friendly vegetarian here. Thank you so much for tuning into the very first episode of the Skinny Podcast. If you're struggling with your weight or you have a weight-related illness, then this episode is definitely for you. Are you familiar with a fat girl in this story? You've experienced some sort of trauma, and after that you've struggled to lose weight. You have struggled with weight loss for as long as you can remember. Have you tried every diet and nothing works? Do you feel like something has to finally give? Or the most frustrating and often devastating one is, I'm sick, now what? Well, that fat girl was once me. Just to get some legalities out of the way, please do not start a new exercise program, change your diet, or medications without consulting your doctor first. I am not a physician, and the information that I'm sharing here is simply based on my personal story, so the results may not be the same for everyone. So, my name is Vanessa Marquez, and I'm here to tell you about how I was able to lose over 100 pounds and finally get healthy. I remember the day that I looked at the scale and that number 237 pounds was staring back at me. I was 25 years old, and that was the most that I had ever weighed. I felt hopeless, and seeing that number made me think, how am I going to lose the weight now? I tried losing weight at 150 pounds, 185, and now I'm a whopping 237 pounds. So I did what everybody else does at this point. I went shopping for bigger clothes, barely a size 18, and a fat slob. Or so I thought of myself. See, I've been an athlete since I was 10. I played soccer, basketball, volleyball, you name it. I played it and I enjoyed every minute of it. But I was never skinny. I was never the skinny girl. And my friends and family had a way of reminding me of that. I've struggled with my weight since I was 7. That's also when I went on my first diet. Playing sports is probably what kept me healthy and active, but in my mind, I was supposed to be skinny. My yo-yo dieting stopped when I was about 22 years old, when I stopped believing that they worked, because of course, they never do work permanently. It did not help that I come from a Puerto Rican family whose idea of a salad was iceberg lettuce with tomatoes and canned corn, loaded with Italian dressing. Can anybody else relate to that? White rice and pinto beans with fried chicken or baked chicken or some sort of steak was a daily meal, but not so much the vegetables. Some of my family members also have no filter. There are the aunts who always had to say, oye, estás gordita. Translation, hey, you're a little fat. Or the, oh my goodness, how much weight have you gained, when they had not seen me for a little while. Or the one that I probably remember the most is when I was asked if I was a cow because it was difficult for me to buy bras and clothes that fit. These are the comments and memories that stuck and still stick well into adulthood. So I'm not sharing this story for you to feel bad or sorry for me. It's actually part of my history, and that's what has led me to this day, where I am fit and I am healthy. Needless to say, it didn't come easy or without some hard work and heartbreak along the way, as most success stories don't. My mom was probably the driving force behind much of my success growing up, for most of my life actually. My parents got divorced when I was 11. My younger brother and I were raised by a single mother. My father was not very active in my life, and we actually had a rocky relationship until my late 20s. My family and I struggled financially, and food was sometimes scarce. In order to put food on the table, my mom would often make white rice with a fried egg on top, the most that she could afford. We ate a lot of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches on white bread, and rice and beans too. Can't forget that. Some research may suggest that bad eating habits start as a young child or can also be brought on by a traumatic event. Because see, food becomes a drug that is used for comfort. And my parents' relationship was often violent and scary. I was always afraid of when the next fight would break out between them. And after my father left, I was afraid of not having enough. There was not enough food and never enough money. I probably ate more than I should have, just because I did learn to use food for comfort. One day, my mom had a little bit of extra money, and she took me to Burger King. After eating a Whopper meal, I asked her to buy me another Whopper. My mom looked at me a little puzzled, and she politely said that the meal I had, the Whopper with fries and a drink, that was enough. I often wonder if her decision to say no was a pivotal moment in my life. Did she spare me a bigger addiction to food? Later on in life, I would continue to cope with food after my own breakups, when I was stressed or simply unhappy with myself. That last part, the unhappiness, that was a way of life for me. Now let's get back to the fat 25-year-old, shall we? I was supposed to be at the prime of my life. I was in college, in a serious relationship. I had a decent job. What is there to not be happy about? I decided that I would go to the gym, lose the weight because I needed to be skinny. I was determined. That is, until I plateaued at 213 pounds. I stopped working out, got frustrated, and regained some of the weight, except that I only got to 224 pounds. But hey, at least it wasn't 237, right? That became my new normal. Now let's fast forward to 2008. I have now graduated from college. I'm engaged and getting married. The stress of planning a wedding, working out, and working too much helped me to get back down to 213 pounds. That's where I plateaued again. I was so frustrated, to say the least. But I think that it's important to mention that I also hated my life. I was miserable, working 2 jobs 7 days a week. See, I was a marketing coordinator by day and a hostess turned waiter by night. And also every weekend. I had no life, to say the least, and no money because my then fiance and I were in so much debt and paying for a wedding. Well, the wedding day came and went, and real life began to settle in. And with that came chronic yeast infections and the sinus infection that saved my life. About 8 months after getting married, I couldn't shake this horrible sinus infection. I was also excessively drinking water, had a horrible bout with insomnia, and had to pee more times than I care to count. TMI, so sorry. Not really. I also weighed 201 pounds, which meant that I had lost 13 pounds in 2 weeks. The 2 weeks prior, I only weighed 213. So it's about 214. I went to my doctor. She gave me an antibiotic for the sinus infection. However, I did not discuss any of the other symptoms with her because out of ignorance, I figured the sinus infection would be gone and so would all of the symptoms. 2 days later, I still felt horrible and I couldn't feel my left leg while I was taking a shower. I knew that numbness in your legs was a sign of diabetes, and I only knew this because the older people in my family who had type 2 diabetes had spoken about this a few times throughout my life. I went back to the doctor, and sure enough, she confirmed it with 2 quick pricks of the finger. That first number, 400, and then the second, 401, made her and I both freak out. She immediately ordered blood work. I was pissed. What do you mean I have diabetes? This disease happens to old people, or so I thought. See, in my mind, you at least had to be 50 or older than that, just like everybody else in my family who had type 2 diabetes. I was only 28. I broke down into tears because I felt like an utter failure. I was fat, and now I'm also sick. I had my blood drawn and went right back to work. I received a call later that evening that I needed to go to the nearest hospital as soon as possible. The blood work confirmed that my A1C was 11.0 and my glucose levels were dangerously high at 572. To put this into perspective, that is darn near close to a diabetic coma. I was hospitalized for the next 4 days because the doctors could not get my glucose under 300. The doctor said, no under 300, no going home. This was my wake-up call, as they pricked and prodded and left me with bruises the sizes of bite marks. I couldn't help but to think, if anything happens to me, that the bills and that job that you hate will still be here, but you won't be. I was also diagnosed with PCOS, which is polycystic ovarian syndrome, a hormonal disorder among women of reproductive age. It also causes insulin resistance and weight gain. I felt like my body was betraying me. But let's be real, I was the one who betrayed it. See, I was always eating fast food on a daily basis for several years. I never ate vegetables, and since processed foods were easy, they were my go-to. Everything was always on the go, and I never had time to eat and didn't care to work out anymore. I left the hospital with 7 different prescriptions, 2 types of insulins. I don't remember which ones. All I remember is that one was short and one was long acting for the evenings, and 2 different types of pills, metformin and glyburide, a glucometer, the glucose strips, and of course, you can't forget the needles. A whopping $200 later, even with insurance. I watched as my new husband didn't think twice and paid for it all. I tried not to freak out as I stood there watching this. We didn't have $200 for medicine. He reminded me that I was more important than any bill or anything else, and that I needed to put myself first. That didn't make me feel any less worthless or like I was adding to our financial burdens. And so began my journey to better health, because at this point I had to learn how to count carbohydrates and protein grams, total carbs, and I began to eat more vegetables. Per doctor's orders, I was on a 1,200 calorie a day diet, allowed to have 30 grams of carbs for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and 15 grams for snacks. If you've ever had to do this type of diet before, you know it's hell and really difficult. One thing about my hospital visit that stuck out with me is that one of the doctors asked me if I would consider weight loss surgery. She explained that bariatric surgery had helped several of her patients, including herself, get back on track with their health because they lost significant weight. And I wouldn't be diabetic anymore. She gave me the information of the hospital's bariatric surgeon and the date of his next general information session. I couldn't help but to wonder, was I really a candidate for gastric bypass surgery? I thought I was just a little overweight. By medical standards, I was obese, morbidly obese, with diabetes and high cholesterol that accompany excessive weight gain. So after doing some research, I learned that my insurance company could potentially cover the cost of surgery. And at that time, it always requires an approval process. After speaking to my husband at the time, we decided to attend the information session. In the meantime, I was determined to get off of diabetes medicines, especially insulin. Where did I get this idea? Well, the day of my diagnosis, my doctor told me that once my glucose was under control with medicine, if I took really good care of myself, it would be possible to get off of medicine and control it with diet alone. However, my friends told me that I would never be off of insulin, that I would be insulin dependent for the rest of my life. Now, if you know me, I'm stubborn and determined. I was off of insulin within the next 30 days, and my doctor was happy about it. I managed for the next 3 years the diabetes with diet, exercise, metformin, and glyburide. I did attend that bariatric info session and began to schedule the required doctor's appointments that are needed for the approval process. But within a month of attending a couple of appointments, my husband and I both lost our jobs. No insurance meant no surgery. We moved to Florida, and at the time, that was one of the hardest states to get insurance approval. My weight fluctuated again between 213 and 224 pounds. I did try to have surgery in Florida, but it wasn't covered through my job's insurance plan, so another door closed. My road to surgery would not be an easy one. It did take 5 years to be exact, but more on that later in a different episode. Almost 1 year after moving to Florida, I was affected by yet another company-wide layoff and was unemployed again. The scariest part about that was when you realize that you don't have insurance and you can't get medicine either. I contacted an insurance agent and tried to obtain my own policy, but unfortunately I couldn't because diabetes was considered a pre-existing condition and preventing me from getting my own policy and getting insured. I also do not have children or other medical services through the state or the government were not available to me. In desperation, I began to research other ways to manage diabetes. I came across an episode of Dr. Oz and learned about Ximena sylvestre, an Indian herb used to manage diabetes. It's called the sugar buster, and it's effective. I also decided that I really needed to get serious about losing weight and being healthy. Since it was something I had never tried, but had thought about often, I became a vegetarian. I joined a gym, and I worked my little butt off. Within 6 months of taking Jimena Silvestre, working out 5 to 6 days a week, and eating a plant-based diet, I lost 34 pounds. I still plateaued at 213 pounds. But this time, I was determined, come hell or high water, to lose this weight. So my next hurdle then became 208 pounds. And the most discouraging was trying to get below 200. It felt like I was stuck at 201 pounds for months until one day I dropped down to 198 and then my lowest 191 pounds. It is now 2001. I have relocated back to Boston, and after I began working, I was back on insurance, and I went back to my doctor, did all the blood work, and I explained to her how I managed the diabetes for the last 8 months and discussed the next steps going forward. I will never forget the day that the nurse practitioner called me and said, "Vanessa, whatever you're doing, keep doing it." She said, "You're no longer diabetic. Keep this up and you won't need to go back on meds." I was so proud and so elated. I was so proud of myself, like I had finally done it and I didn't even qualify for surgery anymore. Fast forward 8 months and now I've gained 40 pounds, struggling yet again to lose the weight. Except this time I was getting my menstrual cycle for 30 days and having to take hormones to make it stop. The gynecologist showed me this graph on her computer, and it was showing me the quick weight gain, and that's what was making my ovaries lazy. And then a follow-up call with the nurse practitioner drove it home again. If I don't do something about this weight and the weight gain, I'd be back on metformin and I would be a diabetic again. Since I was in Boston, I sought out the surgeon that I mentioned before and attended his info sessions again. Getting insurance approval was a lengthy process, and it required some patience on my end. But I did get it approved, and I did have gastric bypass 7 years ago. I have lost a total of 100 pounds, and I have never gained the weight back, ever, in 7 years. Now, this is my story. It is not intended to be a pro-bariatric surgery or plant-based diet episode. It simply worked for me. I'm still a vegetarian and have learned that the ingredients in your food are just as important, if not more so, than counting calories. A lifestyle change with a well-balanced diet and exercise are the most effective for losing weight. In an upcoming episode, I'll discuss more about my vegetarian lifestyle. I do get a lot of questions about how to eat a plant-based diet for diabetes and other reasons. I'll also be interviewing patients who have had bariatric surgery, all 3 different types. In the last 5 years, I've become a certified health coach, a personal trainer, and a group fitness instructor because I want to help people like you and me who are struggling and feeling lost, hopeless and overwhelmed with their health and weight loss goals. So, I'm here for you. If you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them for you. I know it's not easy, but there is hope. There is definitely hope. If you want more information, or if you would like some information on how to work with me, please feel free to reach out to me at whattoeatclub@gmail.com. And if you like this episode, see that subscribe button down below? Please tap that, and you'll get alerts knowing when my next episode has been published. We do publish once a week. Thank you so much for listening. My name is Vanessa, your friendly vegetarian, and I look forward to bringing you more information and more hope in the next week.